extremely important going up against the Calyrex. And let's not wait at all. Let's get all of the power on the field. Miraidon and Lunala staring down the Shadow Rider, Calyrex, and Zamazenta. All four restricted Pokemon immediately.
Yeah, the kind of big quirk of this format, you get to use two of these powerful legendary Pokemon that are normally prohibited, and we've seen Marco even choose to use none of them in his matchup, but both players choosing to bring both of them here. The trainers have told us they're expecting these matches to be a little bit volatile, right? Where one big move could maybe blow this game open, and where they're going to have to make a lot of hard reads. And this turn, very much one of those situations where lots of damage potentially being threatened on either side of the field.
Yeah, you're looking at the 50-50 guessing of, are you going to click Astral Barrage? If you are, I have to click Wide Guard. Instead, Marco is just going to turn off the electric terrain, bringing in the Rillaboom, setting the grassy terrain to lower the power of that Miraidon on Federico's side. There is the Wide Guard coming out from Lunala, but that's not going to do nothing for you this time around. This Electro Drift, though, will deal good damage to the Zamazenta, but the grassy terrain dramatically reducing the amount of damage that Zamazenta takes there, and it can fire right back with a Body Press, doing just a little bit more in terms of percentage.
Now that healing from the grassy terrain going to make a big difference for Zamazenta, and we kind of see some of the counterplay you're going to see throughout the course of this set. Miraidon setting the electric terrain when it enters the field, which normally would have increased its damage, but Rillaboom coming in, reducing that damage, and potentially putting us in a situation where the Zamazenta could survive another Electro Drift, although may want one more turn of grassy terrain recovery in order to guarantee that.
Well, gonna have to see if Marco is going to be able to sneak in that extra turn of grassy terrain recovery to get that safe call there. Federico will, of course, retreat Miraidon to preserve the electric terrain for the future and bring in the Whimsicott, which is typically pretty safe here, especially if a Pokemon protects on the switch-in. Moongeist Beam from Lunala will whiff into the protect, meaning that the Zamazenta is not going to take any additional damage here, while Rillaboom, of course, it's time to reposition.
Yeah, the cat and mouse game of the train game. Miraidon leaving the battlefield so it could try to come back in later, set its electric train back up, but Marco says, not so fast. I'm going to get Rillaboom out of battle. I'm going to get some easy damage down. I'm going to be able to threaten that Rillaboom switch in when Miraidon comes back in later. Very important for both trainers to try to keep the train in their advantage, because Miraidon will do a huge amount of damage to any of the Pokemon on this team if it's able to swing away while the electric terrain is active.
This Whimsicott, though, is extremely threatening on Federico's side. Because the Zamazenta went for the protect, it is under threat of Encore. And Federico also has the option of just going for a Tailwind to make every Pokemon on his side of the field faster than Marco's. Marco will bring out the Ogerpon, one of the best ways of avoiding that Encore trap.
Yeah, another fun situation. This Ogerpon could do a lot of interesting things. The threat of Follow Me makes it a little bit harder to click that Encore button, and if it wanted to, it could do a bunch of damage here, potentially either knocking out a Whimsicott or at least breaking the Shadow Shield of this Lunala. Of course, the danger of that is if you do knock out the Whimsicott, it uses a Tailwind. Maybe you wind up in a situation where your opponent gets a bunch of momentum, getting the full turns of the Tailwind to try to take advantage. And also props for that Whimsicott at all. Typically, when you see it, usually used in the front, so having it back there may have been a little unexpected.
Yeah, back Whimsicott is not something we are used to seeing at all, but here is the Tailwind making the Lunala the fastest thing on the field, and that's a Moongeist Beam going straight into the Ogerpon, but Marco did not fall for the Encore trap, just going to go ahead and break the Shadow Shield on Lunala with that heavy slam, while Ivy Cudgel will pick up that easy KO on Whimsicott and give Marco Silva an early Pokemon lead. But this does mean that Federico is going to be able to get a free switch-in and maximize the turns of this Tailwind.
So that could speed up this battle a little bit. We do see, it's Urshifu coming in. So perhaps like, okay, I don't want to send Miraidon in right away, kind of create a situation where there's an obvious Rillaboom switch on the other side to slow down my Trick Room. Instead, Urshifu going to try to get some damage here, potentially threatening a ton of damage of both these Pokemon. Particularly good also in this Tailwind, where it's the shorter duration speed control effect. So normally you'd like to maybe use some protects, try to slow it down, but Urshifu's Unseen Fist ability allows it to attack through those protects, keep the pressure on, and try to make the most out of the 3 turns of Tailwind that Federico has to take advantage of here.
Right, and Federico showing lots of respect to Marco for the threat of Grassy Glide, which is on this Hearthflame Ogerpon. Marco could opt at any moment switch in the Rillaboom or just use the existing grassy terrain to get the priority on the Grassy Glide onto this Urshifu, but using that Terrestrialization, turning it into a Ghost type means that it will no longer take super effective damage, and should this Zamazenta survive this double up, would not be able to deal any damage with a body press. There's the Grassy Glide dealing a little bit of damage into that terastallized Urshifu. Here are the Surging Strikes, 1, 2, and 3. Not quite enough to pick up the KO onto Zamazenta. But fortunately, it is not just the Urshifu on the field. Lunala is right here to help its buddy out and pick up that KO, bringing our count even.
That's one big restricted Pokemon down, and also helps kind of create a situation for Federico here where maybe he can get closer to his desired endgame. I think whichever Pokemon, or whichever player falls down to 2 Pokemon first could be at a pretty significant disadvantage, because then the other side's more likely to gain control of the terrain, and there's 2 turns remaining in that Tailwind now. I think that's also another key factor here. Not going to be any way to reset the Tailwind, Whimsicott having been defeated so quickly, so Marco perhaps going to work toward a situation where Calyrex can close the game later, but it's coming out right now.
Oh, the one thing that Calyrex has right now that Rillaboom doesn't is the ability to protect and start stalling out some of these turns of Tailwind, or at least threaten the ability to protect.
Yeah, sort of a very interesting decision now for this Urshifu, where which of these Pokemon do you want to try to target? You want to guess wrong. Lunala, unlike Urshifu, does have to worry about attacking into a Protect, and hey, you know, the other direction, both these Pokemon are now weak to Astral Barrage, so the Wide Guard becomes very tempting. You know, maybe every option is available here where I think either Pokemon could feasibly switch out, could feasibly protect. We'll have to see what call these players are making. They told us this is going to be a matchup that was very based on making the right calls, and here's a really critical one in game 1.
Yeah, I think we're about to see some of that volatility right away. Terastallization used for the Calyrex on Marco Silva's side. Ogerpon says, look at me, I want to take these Surging Strikes, and it will only take 2 to knock that Pokemon out. But now, the Calyrex is a Dark type, meaning that it will take resisted damage from any Ghost type attacks from the Lunala. Lunala does have the option of going for the Moonblast as well instead of the Moongeist Beam, and that's exactly what Federico calls, and that's exactly what Federico gets, and is never punished. Psychic into the Urshifu will pick up the KO on that Pokemon, meaning that Marco will be able to protect the Calyrex next turn. That is a huge Pokemon off the field, and now both players are down to their final 2 Pokemon, and the way this works out, that means Marco will have terrain control.
Yeah, and that could make a big difference. This Calyrex pretty low in HP, lots of advantages as well. It's not just the opportunity to protect now, but Rillaboom going to come out here and threaten a fake out into that Miraidon slot with the Choice Specs item. You know, it doesn't have the ability to protect itself, so if he wants to, could try to pick up a knockout here, but also still in danger of being attacked by that Lunala. Going to have to play probably a little bit conservatively for this final turn. This format is very much a game of figuring out what can you afford to give up, what risk is too great. Marco's kind of committed himself to a situation now where he's wound up in the situation. Last turn of Tailwind, we'll have to figure out if he has enough left to take this game back after Federico's kind of been dictating play for the last few turns.
Yeah, Federico has definitely been in the driver's seat in terms of momentum, but Marco has 2 incredibly powerful Pokemon left to counter these 2 Pokemon. You know, it's kind of weird to say that because Federico has both of their restricted Pokemon left, but if Federico does not make the most of this last turn of Tailwind, it's going to be very difficult to break through that Calyrex.
Yeah, and both these Pokemon have some problems there where we see the Fake Out coming in the Miraidon. Lunala only going to be able to attack one of these Pokemon, certainly not going to knock out the Rillaboom. So going to wind up in a situation when the Calyrex probably going to get a chance to swing, especially with that Moonblast harmlessly going to the Calyrex's Protect.
Yep, harmlessly going into the Calyrex's Protect, and now Calyrex is the fastest Pokemon on the field with the Tailwind ending. And now we're on a situation of Wide Guard or not.
Yeah, it was fun to have to predict it, and you know, the Calyrex protecting in the last turn. Sometimes you just want to protect the Wide Guard here, but going to have to make a read. Also keep on, you mentioned the Grassy Glide from the Ogerpon before, but Rillaboom can do that too. So even though it's naturally the slowest Pokemon on the field, has the option of attacking first, although we'll have to see if anything's weakened enough for that to be relevant.
Here's the Wide Guard. Did Marco go for it, or just the single target? The Astral Barrage! Federico gets it right! No damage to either the Miraidon or the Lunala from that Astral Barrage. Can this Rillaboom make anything happen? There was no Dazzling Gleam, or there was no Grassy Glide. Dazzling Gleam picks up the KO onto Calyrex, and Rillaboom takes a little bit of a chunk. But this is going to be so hard for the Great Ape to break through. Miraidon, even though it's at such low health, will go down to this Wood Hammer, and the Lunala, however, has that Electric Seed boost to stall out this Rillaboom.
Yeah, I kind of see a big difference there. What could have happened the last two turns? We saw the fake out going to the Miraidon slot. Perhaps if Rillaboom had gone for that knockout, we're in a very different situation here. But Federico just kind of half a turn ahead, and Rillaboom's going to take this attack very well with its Assault Vest, but still hasn't broken the Shadow Shield on the Lunala. It might be just a little bit too weak. This is still going to hurt, but kind of a piddly amount of damage there. Might still need 2 more Wood Hammers, and the Grassy Terrain's going to heal both of these Pokemon, but with Lunala dealing so much more damage, Marco could be in a situation where he's in danger of losing to Federico for a 3rd time in a row.
Well, there's another Moongeist Beam. Not enough to pick up the KO onto Rillaboom, but Rillaboom will do it himself with the Wood Hammer. That's big damage onto Lunala. There's the recoil from the Wood Hammer. Rillaboom goes down. Federico Camporesi takes game 1 over Marco Silva.
An excellent first game here, and I think the fun of it is, well, this could still go either way, right?
Oh, yeah.
As they told us, that game could have gone either way very feasibly. Federico, the one making the right plays there, able to get just enough advantage of that Tailwind. Great job by him getting that Whimsicott in safely, setting the Tailwind, getting the Sacrifice on a great turn, and was able to do a great job of taking advantage there. If he'd been kind of just 1 turn slower in how he did things, I think Marco would have been able to play that one in a way that would have allowed him to turn around, but knocks out the Calyrex just in time.
Absolutely, and I love how calm and composed Federico played this game. I had a chance to talk to him before this match began and talk to him about what the difference is between playing this International Championship Finals versus the other 2 that he played as a senior. And the biggest thing he told me was that when he was a senior, he felt like he was playing against people that were worse than him. Now he is finally playing against someone that he feels is better than him, so he doesn't feel that extreme pressure and expectation that he has to win this match, and he played like it.
Yeah, absolutely, and he kind of played like he knew what Marco was going to do a little bit there. We kind of seen some matches over the course of this weekend where players kind of guessed wrong at the way their opponents were thinking, but both these trainers know how good their opponent is, and they can kind of make plays knowing that both sides are considering all of the viable options that they could make.
All right, here we go into game 2. Federico leading the Lunala and the Incineroar. Maybe a little bit of a taunt. Don't forget that you can download Wolfie Glick's Incineroar NAIC 25 Cone Parish. You can use that in your own switch back home up against the Zamazenta and the Rillaboom for Marco.
Yeah, not just a taunt, but also worth keeping in mind here, but this shows a very different hand for Federico. Incineroar didn't appear in that first game, and neither did the Ursaluna, so perhaps showing a slower option here, but, the Miraidon going to make that a little bit trickier, right? Well, is that what you're actually doing? Because now he's the one who has the fastest Pokemon on the field, even though you started out with Incineroar, who's the slowest.
Yeah, and unlike game 1, now there is terrain control for Federico. That body press, though, did a lot of damage to Miraidon on the switch, and that's a lot of damage on your restricted Pokemon just to get in position. And Rillaboom, though, will continue to pivot out. U-turn will break the Shadow Shield for now. Of course, should Rillaboom come back in, it will heal right back up there.
It's sort of an ironic version of winning the terrain there, where Lunala would probably have appreciated one more turn of the Grassy Terrain, but it does give us a situation here where the Miraidon is really threatening. Assuming Federico is going for a more Trick Room-oriented setup, it's these 2 Pokemon who started on the field that are very important to remove. The Rillaboom very threatening to the Ursaluna in the back, where both has a natural type advantage and also can potentially use its Grassy Glide to get advantage of the priority, as well as this Zamazenta just sort of being a problem here with the Wide Guard. But we're going to see the Calyrex come in, so for now we're going quick, just like at the beginning of game 1.
Oh, Wide Guard is so risky here because Marco only needs a Psychic into that Miraidon to pick up the KO. But there it is, Wide Guard. Federico thinks that Marco will be going for the Astral Barrage here, and he gets it right again. Federico knows exactly what Marco is thinking every time. No damage to the Lunala, no damage to the Miraidon, and that means Miraidon gets to swing this Electro Drift for free with the Electric Terrain into Calyrex. Ring the bell, 1-hit KO for Calyrex.
Oh, that's a huge knockout. No Focus Sash here with the Life Orb. Calyrex going down, not doing any damage in game 2.
That Body Press, though, will trade right back, so Miraidon gets the Calyrex off the field, and you know what, Miraidon, you did your duty. You can rest proud here. And now we see the Ursaluna in the back. There is the option for the Trick Room mode.
Oh, it's going to come out right now. Very interesting situation here where, again, this is a format about sacrificing the right thing at the right time. Calyrex, such a powerful Pokemon. You hate to see it go down early, but if Trick Room were to go up, it's not very effective, right? It's just kind of going to be there to be a sacrifice. So, hey, maybe this doesn't look as bad as it looks. It's the Incineroar coming on the outside of the field. So both trainers feel like, hey, Incineroar is pretty good. maybe I should use that one.
Great Pokemon to catch this Ursaluna as well. Gets that Intimidate down onto that Pokemon, which just isn't going to be able to do enough damage until the Flame Orb activates.
Yeah, Incineroar's got a lot to do on this turn as well. I could try to go for a fake out on the Ursaluna, but as we're seeing here, it has the option of terastallizing to dodge that fake out. And part of the reason Rillaboom probably didn't come out there is to avoid activating a grassy terrain. That Shadow Shield's still not available for Lunala, so if Incineroar is able to get a hold of it, it could do a ton of damage. Maybe trade the restricted Pokemon back.
Yeah, you got two incredible targets for a knockoff here from that Incineroar as well. Either getting rid of the Flame Orb on the Ursaluna or just dealing so much damage to that Lunala, 4 times super effective damage to that Pokemon. The Zamazenta will be the first Pokemon to terastallize here. It is going to be pure water typing, removing that weakness to the ground type attacks from the Ursaluna. Maybe a little bit of a hint about Marco's targeting there if he's not that worried about that.
Yeah, this is super high value terastallizing potential for this Ursaluna as well. It does have to be careful for the dark type attack from Incineroar, but on the flip side now, immune to a body press and immune to a fake out.
Immune to body press, immune to fake out, now weak to knockoff. Here's the heavy slam from Zamazenta into Lunala, going to break a little bit of the damage, and the knockoff, it's enough! The heavy slam plus the knockoff, a critical hit, knocks out the Lunala, and Marco is right back in this. This Ursaluna, though, still has something to say. It's gonna fire off a headlong rush into the Incineroar, and it hangs on.
Oh, it's not enough, and that's a big deal. Now that Federico's down to 2 Pokemon, Incineroar's going to have to come out here, only going to have 1 more Intimidate. There's some options on Marco's side of the field, right? A little dangerous to try to rotate too much, but with that Incineroar currently on the field, you have to get it in and out of battle. It's going to be very effective with both of these Pokemon. Only physical attackers remaining on Federico's side of the field.
Yeah, and this Zamazenta will easily be able to pick up a KO on that Incineroar with a body press of its own, which means that Federico either has to trade the Incineroar for damage onto Marco's Incineroar or Rillaboom, or go for the fake out and leave up that slot open. But Marco is going to go ahead and switch out the Incineroar, wants to make sure that he can get a second Intimidate down regardless. That means Rillaboom is now out on the field. The grassy terrain is back out on the field, so all of these Pokemon are going to start healing right back up, and Marco protects the Zamazenta. Not going to take any damage this turn, not going to be flinched by the fake out, but that's all right for Federico. All he wants is a big damage, but the Facade also targeting into the Zamazenta, so Rillaboom gets in for free, and that means Marco is in such a good position here to cycle these Intimidates.
Yeah, devastating position. A lot of great options for Marco's side of the field. You also can kind of just trade attacks here if you want to. Incineroar now just being pinned by the body press, a Wood Hammer potentially going to the other slot. Federico realized, like, hey, there is no way I'm winning this one, and we're going to see a Game 3 in the Masters Finals.
Game 3 for our Masters Division Finals in North America. This is what everyone wanted to see, and I could not be more excited to be going into this Game 3. Marco playing so well there, got the critical hit, which was very important on that turn, but then made the most of it, immediately locked Federico out of that game.
Yeah, don't forget, the Electric Seed is the item on the Lunala, so the critical hit matters. They're avoiding a boosted stage of defense, but an excellent game. And I think we kind of have seen over the course of these first 2 games kind of what both these trainers are good at. Federico's really made some great reads. It seems like he's been a step ahead largely on predicting what Marco will do, but I think Marco's maybe the best odds manager in Pokemon, doing a great job of avoiding getting in situations where even if he gets the call wrong, he loses the game, has enough resources, and you kind of see at the end there, just checkmate, right? Where, well, lost his restricted Pokemon early, looked really bad, but Calyrex wasn't the key Pokemon in this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. The Zamazenta was so critical, and preserving the ability to switch in and out with the Rillaboom and the Incineroar, especially because Federico showed that he went for the Trick Room mode here. These Intimidates were huge, meant that Incineroar stayed on the field for much longer than anyone expected. And Marco Silva is now 1 game away from winning 2 international championships in 1 season and his 4th title overall. Undisputably the best regular season we have ever seen out of a competitor.
Yeah, and very fitting this is going to a 3rd game. These 2 trainers have been so good all season long. Both huge threats to win the World Championships. And hey, wouldn't it be great to go into Worlds with momentum from winning this tournament?
Oh, it would be so great indeed. And Federico is switching back to what worked in Game 1, at least as far as the leads are concerned. That's Miraidon and Lunala, this time facing down the Rillaboom and the Zamazenta immediately. So again, Marco Marco will win the terrain war here. Rillaboom is able to set that up and already immediately has fake out pressure on Miraidon.
Yeah, the deviation from the first game is Rillaboom's out here instead of the Calyrex. I do thanks to Marco's advantage, able to kind of keep a step ahead here. Fake out coming out immediately, going to stop Miraidon from acting, leaving Zamazenta for a pretty excellent opportunity here.
There's another body press into the Miraidon. That is something that Marco has been doing over and over again, targeting down that Miraidon. But that means Zamazenta is open to a Moongeist beam. Deals a decent amount of damage back to the Zamazenta. And, you know, this Miraidon with the combo of fake out plus the body press may just be in grassy glide range.
Yeah, this is a pretty scary situation now for Federico's side of the field. Really can't afford to lose this Miraidon for nothing. It is the most powerful offensive Pokemon on his team. And I see the difference with Marco being able to lead Rillaboom, such a critical Pokemon in this matchup.
All right, Federico is showing that he wants to go back to the Trick Room mode. No grassy glide, just a raw Draco Meteor into the Rillaboom. Assault Vest doing so much work for Rillaboom as Zamazenta now picks up the KO with that body press. So Federico has given up the terrain war, but frankly, for this team, it has done its job. It has activated the Electric Seed and is happy to have this grassy terrain to set up the Trick Room and then immediately heal back up to get that Shadow Shield active once again.
Yeah, that's the downfall of the switch, right? Where previously we saw the train not be quite right here, but it's going to wind up full health at the end of this turn, as well as having that boosted defense. And with the Trick Room active, Lunala's pretty scary. And also, Federico, much like in Game 1, is going to be able to set his speed control on the same turn. He gets a free switch, going to get the full 5 turns of Trick Room to try to win this tournament.
Oh, and Ursaluna is angry, did not like how Game 2 went down. Now out on the field, staring down Zamazenta and Ogerpon. High value terrestrialization here potential for Ursaluna.
A scary spot though, right? You'd love to just attack this Zamazenta, currently weak to ground type attacks, but Ogerpon says, hey, not so fast. The threat of that follow me makes this play much more complicated for Federico. So very critical here. He's in a good position, but going to need to get 1 or 2 more turns right in order to really get an advantage that could make him an international champion.
Yeah, and that's the thing about getting the free switch in for Ursaluna. It did not activate the Flame Orb, so there is a lot of incentive for Federico to play this slow, protect with the Ursaluna to make sure that you are definitely activating the Flame Orb on this turn. Goes on the offensive with the Lunala, so another Moongeist beam being launched at the Zamazenta. A critical hit for Federico, but Zamazenta hangs on. Ogerpon with the Ivy Cudgel will break the Shadow Shield, deal a little bit of damage, and the Heavy Slam deal a little bit more. But I don't think that was enough damage to knock out this new Lunala. Marco is going to have to stall these Trick Room turns.
Yeah, that's a great bit of trading there for Federico. Able to put some important damage down the field. Yeah, Lunala looks great. We see what happens when its defense boost actually matters. One thing to keep in mind, though, if Ogerpon is able to attack Lunala again, there is that boosted critical hit rate in Ivy Cudgel, which gives it a better of a normal odds of removing the effect of that Electric Seed by getting a critical hit, which ignores defense increases.
And one of the risks of playing slow with Ursaluna with that protect means that Marco could easily just go for a spiky shield and a protect here. Stall out another turn, just sort of see what Federico wants to do, but it's going to be the terrestrialization from the Ursaluna. Ursaluna cannot hang out as a normal ground type against the Ogerpon and the Zamazenta. We'll have to terrestrialize into the ghost type spooky Lunar Bear for everyone here as Ogerpon protects with the spiky shield, and that's also going to be a headlong rush right into it. No protect coming out from the Zamazenta, however. That leaves it open to an attack from this Lunala. There it is. It's the Moongeist Beam. Marco giving up the Zamazenta here after the critical hit. That Pokemon will go down. That means that only Rillaboom or the 4th Pokemon, which you have to assume is the Calyrex at this point, can come out. And that's really scary when you still have multiple turns of Trick Room available for this Ursaluna and Lunala.
Yeah, that's only 2 down, and Rillaboom is an option to come in here. You know, so you'd love to hide that final Pokemon as long as you can. Again, you're probably assuming it's a Calyrex. So, Marco, more than any other trainer in this tournament, has proven he's willing to use unconventional Pokemon, so you can't assume for sure.
Very true, and Marco is thinking very hard about what the final Pokemon will be. It is the Calyrex. So Calyrex now out on the field once again. Again, is able to protect, but unlike the other times we've been seeing the Calyrex, it is the slowest thing on the field and is immediately threatened by both of these Pokemon.
Yeah, pretty awkward bit of type matchups here as well, but the advantage is the terrestrialization hasn't been used in the side of the field. You know, maybe you could go for a big follow me and a terrestrialization trying to get around these attacks, but it's a tough spot for Marco. Marco now. He doesn't get in a situation where not only can he survive the Trick Room, but get in a situation where he actually wins if he survives it. He's better than maybe anyone at the world at surviving these disadvantaged situations, but one more turn wrong is probably going to end this one.
Can Marco Silva find his way out of this? 2 turns remaining of Trick Room. Ogerpon is retreating. That means that there will be no follow me coming out from that Pokemon. Instead, Rillaboom back out on the field, and Calyrex just goes for the protect. That means that there will be no damage coming out from this Ursaluna or this Lunala that did go for the wide guard here. But now, an even trickier situation for Marco. Have to imagine the only option here is to try to switch out that Calyrex and try to win with just the Calyrex in the back.
Yeah, not such a bad turn there, right? At least gets through one more turn of this. Fortunately, Rillaboom coming in here normally so good against Trick Room, but now facing down 2 Ghost-type Pokemon, that Fake Out's completely useless.
Completely useless, and they are both healthy, and the grassy terrain has expired. That means there is not even an option to go for a grassy glide here. This Calyrex now is vulnerable. You could either go for a double protect or a switch, but if you do, without doing either of those, you are leaving that Pokemon open to an attack from the Ursaluna or the Lunala.
The grassy terrain also could matter here because not only would have been reducing the damage of that Earthquake, right, where suddenly it's also getting a little bit scarier here.
Yeah, the Earthquake always an option here without the grassy terrain. Marco will retreat the Calyrex to preserve it for once Trick Room ends after this turn. The only way to ensure that that Calyrex is 100% safe was to do this. Switch the Ogerpon in instead and tank this headlong rush from Ursaluna, and it survives! Single-digit health for sure on that Ogerpon, but that's all you need. 1 hit point is it. Ursaluna is going to take that grassy glide without priority as Lunala fires back with the Moongeist Beam. That's going to connect onto Rillaboom, and it survives! Both the Rillaboom and the Ogerpon on single-digit health here.
And these Pokemon have been trained to be international champions, and we also see the Trick Room expiring. So some good and some bad here, right? Some complicated board state. Now, there are 2 physical attackers out. We see the final Pokemon on Federico's side of the field, that Incineroar, so could try to get Intimidate down, maybe set a second Trick Room. Hard to imagine we're going to see a second one stalled out. Very important turn now for Marco. Going to be tough to trade positively, but this is kind of his final chance.
When in doubt, switch in Incineroar, but crucially, the Ogerpon is still out on the field. It does still have that heightened critical hit rate from the Ivy Cudgel as well. Marco is not out of this just yet. There is still the possibility to prevent this Trick Room. Here comes the Incineroar. It's going to get the Intimidate down onto both the Rillaboom and the Ogerpon here. Huge nerf to both of these Pokemon's physical attack, and they're going to need every ounce of strength they have to make that happen. Spiky Shield from the Ogerpon not going on the effect at all. Instead, the Woodhammer from Rillaboom connects onto the Incineroar, deals just a little bit of damage, and will knock itself out with the recoil once again. That's going to offer a free switch in for the Calyrex, but at what cost? The cost is Trick Room. It means giving up your entire speed advantage for the rest of the game.
Oh, this is looking bad. I mean, even ignoring the speed advantage now, how do you deal with this Incineroar going to resist all of the attacks left of this game? Both the Calyrex and the Ogerpon going to struggle to damage this. And hey, you can't even really focus it down, right? That Lunala's still scary, and there's still an Ursaluna, one of the scariest Pokemon in this format, with the full turns of Trick Room to potentially take advantage of here. Looking bleak for Marco, and it looked like Federico could once again defeat him.
This looks like checkmate. The combination of the Dark-type Incineroar next to Wide Guard on Lunala means that this Calyrex can't do anything to Incineroar. It is untouchable in this position, and it is free to go for whatever it wants to do. Calyrex knows it can't do anything right now. It's going to protect itself while Lunala covers for an offensive attack from that Calyrex. That means it's all about Incineroar. Knock off to Hearthflame Ogerpon. That Pokemon is now down and out. And with just Calyrex under Trick Room and 3 Pokemon, Federico Camporesi is going to defeat Marco Silva once again.
Nothing he can do here now. What an excellent set by both players, but the Trick Room mode able to work this time. Didn't work in game 2. You'll see the Terastallization. Marco not giving up, doing everything he can to keep himself in this game. This will allow him to survive a knockoff, but there's still no path to actually damaging this Incineroar.
Yeah, here is the one thing you can hope for, is that Federico makes a mistake and goes on the offensive with this Lunala using Moongeist Beam. to stop very effective damage onto that Pokemon, but Federico doesn't. He goes for the Moonblast. Federico Camporesi is your 2025 North America International Champion.
Excellent season by Hipster for capping it off with an international championship victory. What a great